Hey everybody, this is hwsteele, and I wanted to do a video after a comment that was left in one of my previous videos, I think the most recent video actually, about how to change a certain setting in the Astrolog program. I wanted to do this video as a tutorial how to change the most basic settings in Astrolog 6.4. Now, I'm not actually used to Astrolog 6.4 because I've been using 6.1, so I've just downloaded 6.4 so that we can work on this, or I can show this to you guys. Astrolog is a free open source code astrology/astronomy program. It's basically a graphical ephemeris, which means that it shows you in a graphic way where the planets are in the zodiac or in a particular sign of the zodiac, so forth and so on. And the first thing that I do, this is what it looks like when you first open it right here. And the first thing I'll do is, whoops, there we go, stretch it to make it bigger here so it's a bit easier to see. And of course you can resize it however you want to, full screen or drag like I did to change the size to whatever you want. The next thing that I'll do is I'll go here to graphics, and I'll click on character scale, and I'll change to large. And what that does is change obviously the size of the characters here in the actual wheel so that the numbers and the glyphs that show the zodiac signs and the planets are larger, making them easier to see. Later I'll show you how to change the size of this text here. I'm not sure, I don't think there's a way to do it from the menu. I could be wrong. Excuse me. But there is actually a file that gets downloaded with the Astrolog program in their folder where you can change settings and it stays changed, so the next time you open the program it opens up how you want it to, because every time you close Astrolog all the settings that you change here are erased and it goes back to the generic way that you open it. So if I close this here and then open it back up, this is what it looks like. So until we change that file, the settings are always going to bring it back to the small size, the small graphics and everything like that. So anyway, the first thing that I'll do is size it how I want to. Well, let me rephrase that. After you learn how to change the settings in that file, you won't have to change all the settings that I'm going to show you here. But I'm going to show you here so that you can work with it and kind of get a jump start on how to use it. So we're going to go to graphics, character scale, go to large so it's a little bit easier to see. The next thing I do is I change the color of the water signs. The water signs and the water planets are all blue, but I want to change them to cyan, which is actually a light blue color, so it's easier to see. So if we go to settings, and then let's see, actually I think it's view. Yeah, there we go. Set colors. Under the view menu, go to set colors, and then the elements right there, we're going to change water from blue to cyan. Click OK, and then that makes that the light blue, and it's easier to see. Now some people like a white background, and to do that I believe you go to graphics, yeah, right here under graphics, and click reverse background, and that gives you a white background. And to me, I don't like it. I don't like it like this. It's harder for me to see. So I like to keep it with the dark background. And then this color scheme right here with the water signs as this light blue. Although I do keep the opposition aspects the darker blue. Just a personal preference. You can change those also. Now the next thing I'll do is I'll go to settings and restrictions, and that brings up a list of what you can actually have displayed on the wheel itself. So I like to turn off everything under the houses. I don't particularly use unless I'm doing something intraday. So I turn those off, or I'm doing natal, something along the natal or intraday. I'll use the houses, or specifically the ascendant and the descendant and the midheaven. But anyway, just to use it normally, I like to turn those off, and then I'll turn Pluto off also. Just a personal preference, no details as to why here. I click OK, and then I'll clean it up a little bit so there's not so many things on the screen. Because if we went to settings and restrictions, and unrestricted everything, it would just be an absolute mess like you can see here, and it would make, very little sense. It'd be hard to use. So we'll go to restrictions, restrict all, but then I want the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune to go ahead and show up. Now, to clean things up even more, like I said, I don't use the ascendant and the midheaven unless I'm doing natal things or intraday. I don't need the house system to be set up to anything other than null. And what that means is the houses perfectly match the signs. So to do that, you go to settings, click on house system, and then generic is Placidius right here. And that's basically the normal common Western astrology house system right there. But we're going to change it, or I'm going to change it to null, because that cleans up the wheel quite a bit. And unless I'm doing a very specific type of astrology or forecasting, I don't need the house system. But if I need them turned back on, all I have to do is go to settings, house or house system right there, and click on it. So that's the next thing I do. Okay, the next thing after that is to change the aspect orbs. Now if we look at this here, we see, we can see the red aspect right here. These are actually squares. The green ones are trines, and the blue ones are sextiles right there, or 60-degree aspects. And you can see how, like, this one right here is just dotted, and this is dotted. And then we have one that's solid. Well, the further the orb, let me go ahead, let me do this. Let me restrict everything except for the sun and Mars. We'll just do that. Now, as I move them around or change the amount of time, you see how they start to come into aspect right there, a square. It starts as dots and the line gets more and more solid, and then it becomes a solid line, then it starts to change again. Well, what's happening here is the orb, if we go to settings, click on aspect settings right there, the orb for the square, which is this particular aspect right there, is set to 7 degrees. That means a square is 90 degrees, but 7 degrees away from the square, or like 83 degrees, it's going to start to show a square on here. And then 7 degrees after the 90, or 97 degrees, it's still going to show the square there. So to change that, all you have to do is put another number in here, like I'll put 1 in here. So there's an orb of 1 degree. These are the number of degrees in orb. So the square will have a 1 degree orb. Now what that means is, as we go back in time or forward in time, instead of taking a very long time to show the orb or the aspect disappear because it has a very large orb, it appears and disappears very quickly because it only has that 1 degree of separation. So it uses it shows you the square from 89 degrees to 91 degrees as opposed to 83 degrees to 97 degrees. So you can set the orb to whatever you like. Usually I have the orb set to 2 most of the time. And I actually have it set in that file I was telling you about earlier so that it stays set at 2. Because if I change this to 2 now and then close the program, the next time I open it back up, it's going to be set at 7 again. So all of these things that I'm changing here, I either have to change them every single time I open up Astrolog, or I have to go into that file and change the settings in that file so that the next time I open Astrolog, it has all of those settings how I would normally change them. So that's a big time saver, and like I said, I'll show you that in a little bit. So I changed the size of the glyphs right there. I changed the color of the water signs. I changed the orb. I changed the restrictions so I have the planets that I want to use on there. Then I go to aspect settings and I change the orb. I'm just going to change all these to 2 right here. Now it shows you the name of the aspect right here, conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile, and it shows you the angle right there. You don't have to worry about influence because that's basically just the program's forecasting, I guess you could say, actual the astrological part of the program, which I don't actually use. I just use the ephemeris part of it. But we can also change the color if we want to any color right here. Like the square is currently red, I could change that to, you know, purple if I wanted to, and then it would obviously show up purple. So let me change that back to red. Right there you are. Okay, so we can also turn on any of the aspects that we want to. We can also change the number of degrees if we wanted to. Like if I wanted to use a square and say, well, I'm going to make it 80 degrees instead, I could do that, and we see that the square has disappeared. And now as I go forward in time, that when they're actually 80 degrees apart as opposed to 90 degrees, it shows the orb, or not the orb, it shows the square aspect right there. Now, I don't really have to do that because there is an 80-degree aspect that I could just change, or I could just turn on right there. And it already has an orb of 1. So it shows that right there. So that would be 80 degrees, and then I could go back and we have the 90 degrees like it's supposed to be, a square. But there's one thing I want to point out. When you change the aspect settings, see how we turned this one off? Oh, it looks like they fixed that. Never mind. Well, then I don't have to tell you that part. They fixed something that was kind of a pain in the butt from Astrolog 6.1 and before here, so that's a good thing. So never mind. I won't even cover that to confuse anyone. Okay. So I open it up, I change the size of these, I change the color of the water sign, I change the restrictions to what I want, then I change the aspect settings to what I want, and then I can pretty much do what I want, except for I like to use, instead of the zodiac position, meaning the sign, it tells you, like for instance, the sun is in 10 degrees Sagittarius, 39 minutes, which would be right here. I like to see the full 360 degrees of the zodiac instead. To change that setting, you go to settings, you go to display settings, and then up here you can use either the zodiac position, the hours and minutes. Hours and minutes of right ascension would be used for the equatorial system, which gives you declination, because right now we're not using that, and all we see is the latitude of the planets, which is only a few degrees above or below the sun. But the declination, where you can get things upwards of 25, 26 degrees of declination, that's a different setting. I'll show you that in a minute. But I like the 360 degrees right there. So we click on that, and then we see that we have the number of degrees in the total size of the zodiac. Tripping over myself there. Okay, so this is essentially set up how I like to use it now. Obviously, I just have these two planets on. I would normally have the other planets on. And pushing the plus key or the minus key makes you go forward or backwards 1 day at a time. If I wanted to change that, I would push shift and then the number 4, and then I would go back or forth 1 day at a time. The number 4 or the dollar sign equals 1 day at a time. The number 3 or the pound sign equals 1 hour at a time. We can see it changing 1 hour now. The number 2 or the at sign equals 1 minute at a time, and then the number 1 is 1 second at a time. So it changed it back to 1 day at a time. Using the number 5 or the percent sign takes you 1 month at a time. The number 6, or I don't know what they call that symbol actually. I can't remember. Anyway, the number 6 on the keyboard takes you a year at a time, and then it goes a decade at a time, and then a century at a time. Now, with Astrolog 6.1, if I remember correctly, they use the Swiss ephemeris, and the data goes back probably, I think it's probably a 5,000 year ephemeris. So it has quite a bit of a range forward and backwards to use on that. Now, let me show you, let's see. If we go to info, this is where you go set chart info, and you can change the day or the month, the day, and the year right here, also the time, all in one place. You can change daylight savings, turn it on or turn it off. It's set on auto detect automatically. But one thing you need to remember is if you're going back far enough in time, which is, I don't know exactly when, the 40s, 30s and 40s in the United States, daylight savings time was not used like it is now. So you'd have to do research to find out exactly when it started and didn't start in the state or country that you're in. And then the time zone, I would have to set this, like for myself, I'm in Central Standard Time, which is right here. If I'm doing something with New York, I would use Eastern Standard Time right there. Now when I click OK and come back to info, set chart info, you see that it doesn't show the Eastern Standard Time right there. It shows 5 hours W, which is west of Greenwich Mean Time. So keep that in mind. Once you've set it, like if I set it to Central Standard Time, it's going to show 6 the next time I open it, like this. Okay, so keep that in mind. Then you can set your longitude and latitude here, and then you can name it whatever you want, and then you can set the location however you want. Obviously, like if you did New York Stock Exchange, you could write up here Stock Exchange, and then New York right there. Set the latitude and longitude. This is degrees, followed by a period for the number of minutes, and then W for west. Latitude has, the longitude either has west or east, and the latitude has north or south. Let's see. And all this has to be reset every time you open it, unless you change that file, which I'm going to show you here in a little bit. Now you can, excuse me, you can go and save certain things, like right here, save chart info. We could call it whatever we want. Test. Click save. And then the next time you want to open this up specifically, it wouldn't have the, here, let me show you. Close Astrolog. We'll open Astrolog back up, open the file, we'll go to test. I have all this other stuff in here. Test. All test does is change it to the one thing that I changed over here in info, which was the time zone right there. As you can see, the colors are not changed, the size of the whole program is not changed, none of that stuff is saved, which is kind of a bummer. That's why you want to change it in the program. So anyway, if you want to change your location, that's where you do it. You go to info, set chart info. You can also set a second chart's information, so you can do overlay charts. Right here we have it set for no relationship. We could do a comparison chart, and it gives a second wheel right inside the first one, right like that, and then you can move forwards or backwards. That's fun to play with if you want to do a comparison. So, trying to think, that's the basic settings that I use, is to change the colors, the size, the graphics. So let's go to that file. Excuse me. Okay, so when you go into the folder that it was downloaded, I downloaded it to Astrolog 6.4 because it's version 6.4. The file you're going to find is right here. It's the Astrolog AS file, 7 kilobytes. And we see that I've already looked at it, so it's updated here. And we need to use a WordPad editor or a text editor, I guess. So I just use Notepad and I open it up, and you have to go over here and make sure you show all files because it's not specifically a text file. And then the AS stands for Astrolog settings. This is the file right here. We want to open that up. Now, if you look here, you see a bunch of different stuff. One of the things is if you wanted to change, remember how it auto detects daylight savings? Well, that right there is it. If you wanted to change your coordinates for when you opened up, for instance, if you want it to always be New York City or Chicago or wherever you live, you would put those coordinates in here. If you come down here, the aspect orbs, remember how we changed that from 7 to 2? You could change those right here. Like for instance, I just changed these, just a couple of them. I'll show you. The next time I open the program up, the orb will be set to 2 as opposed to 7, so I don't have to change those particular things right there. Default restrictions. 1, I believe, yeah, 1 is turned off and 0 is turned on, which is kind of backwards. Normally 0 is turned off and 1 is turned on. So anyway, if I wanted to turn Pluto off, for instance, I would turn that to 1. If I wanted the cusps turned off, I would just change this to 1. Right, like that, and the next time I open it, they're not going to be displayed. Let me just go ahead and change these since I'm right here. Let's see. All these influence and things we don't really have to worry about. We have default colors right here. Let's see, element colors are red, blue, green. I'm going to see, this is cyan's abbreviation right there. I'm going to change blue to CYA. So the next time the program opens up, it will be cyan, and I don't have to change that. And then over here, we can see right here we have the character scale. That's the one we can change in the program. Those are the the glyphs and so forth. So we can set those to 3. And then the text scale, this is where we change the text scale, 1 to 400. I can set that to 150 to make the text a little bit bigger. So next time I open it up, it will be bigger. So anyway, you can look all through here because it's pretty easy to figure out what everything is. They listed everything pretty well. So you can change the settings in here so the Astrolog program will look how you want it to when it opens up. Now, for instance, the size of the program, 480 by 480, we could do 720. Whoa, that's way too big. 720 by 720. Is just an example. So doing that, the program's going to be bigger. So all you got to do is click save like that. And then the next time we open the program, 150. So that value right there is not in range. So I can't change it to 150. I have to change it to 200 most likely. So we see the program opens up way bigger here. So you're going to have to play around with your settings. There we go. View. If it ever comes up like this, just go to view and show graphics. Now it has the same settings. Notice our glyphs are bigger over here now. It doesn't have the ascendant in midheaven like we had. It doesn't have Pluto up here because I deleted that. This did not change because you're not allowed to change it apparently. It's either 100, 200, 300, 400, I'm guessing. So let me go ahead and try changing that. Actually, need to go to Notepad, open, and then settings, and 150, not allowed, so 200. Click save. Pretty easy, see? There we go. And this is what it looks like. this time. So the letters much easier to see there, and we can get in the program and we can change it so that the display setting is 360 degrees also. So I don't remember the defaults that I have already in the other program to have it set up like I want, so I'm going to have to go in there and look at the old version, because the old version of Astrolog, version 6.1, is what I've been using. I literally have not used Astrolog 6.4, so that's why I didn't know exactly on all of this stuff how to do it, because some of the settings have actually changed. Some of what you can do have changed in the menu up here. It's a little bit different, not much different. So, but anyway, this is the basics on how to change the settings for what you want displayed in there, the restrictions for the planets, the aspect settings, the house system, the display settings that show you that file, so you can go in there and change things, so you can eventually, after you've worked with it enough, you can change those default settings, so every time you open up the program, it will open up to the correct size that you want. Everything will be set up how you want. The location will be how you want. All that good stuff. So in no way was this an exhaustive example. See, this is Astrolog 6.1. This is what I have that I'm used to using. But anyway, like I said, this was not exhaustive at all. It was just showing you the basics. And they do have help files. They're decent, not the greatest, so it'll take you a little while to work with it, but it's not a bad program at all, especially for free, and it has a fair amount of versatility to it. So hopefully this helps everybody. That's all I can think of off the top of my head that I wanted to show you about it. So I'll talk to you later.